Cool. How's the Sur-Ron?
It's good. It's doing good.
Is it making it easier? No clutch?
Yeah.
It just spins out a lot?
Yeah.
And
that water's good.
And it
needs better suspension.
Needs better suspension. This, I forget who makes the suspension. D&M. It's cool looking suspension, but from a off-road perspective, it's kind of junk.
Yeah. It's like being on a pogo stick.
Yeah, you look like a pogo stick in the rocks.
Yeah. Looks like it's gonna fall off. That's why I hold on for dear life.
So it needs some suspension upgrades.
Although it goes like uphill pretty good.
Yeah, you made the uphills look pretty easy.
Yeah, yeah. She rode right past me.
She passed you on the inside line on the race bike.
When in doubt, use your feet.
I thought you were gonna say when in doubt, throttle out.
Yeah, that too. Sometimes. That's what I do.
Well, since my Honda 450 is in hold mode because the Honda dealer doesn't have some gas to heat up my engine cases to do the bearings. Oh, what a lame excuse, but I guess that's what we're living in COVID times. So I can't put the engine back together, which means I can't do anything to that bike. So I've got the Surron here, and if you've watched other videos, we are not happy with the suspension. It's way too harsh in rocks, and if you jump this bike, it bottoms out really easy. Okay, so I pulled the front forks off the Surron because I needed to measure the steer tube. Turns out these Surrons have a very long steer tube. Very few mountain bike, downhill mountain bikes have a steer tube long enough to work with this. So it's going to be really hard to find a used fork. Every one I've looked at, the steer tube's not long enough. But one thing I wanted to show, look at the rust that's in here. So that is not good. This bike is less than a year old, and these headsets are not sealed very well. You can see the rust already starting to develop on this needle bearing. That's really bad. Like, it's 8.5 inches. I don't believe you could go any shorter than that, because when I pulled this apart, the steering head that clamps onto here, the part that holds your handlebars, it had about at least a 1/4 inch gap, which means this upper clamp is barely holding onto that steer tube. Really, when you cut these, they should be flush with, at least flush or even stick up above. And this was not. So when Surron built these bikes, in my opinion, they cut the steer tube too short because of the way this clamp was only halfway clamped on to the steer tube. So you cannot go shorter than 8.5 inches. And in fact, a 9-inch or maybe an 8 3/4 inch steer tube would be better, because it would actually come up all the way and be at least flush or even above this to allow the full clamping surface to clamp on. So I don't know why Surron cut it as short as they did. Maybe, I don't know, it's hard to say, but maybe it has to do with the adapter they used. So maybe because of that, and because of having to do some type of adapter, they accidentally cut these shorter than they should have been. Not really sure, but the point is, when I go to buy a new fork, which I will because this D&M fork is terrible, it's an okay fork if you ride in areas that don't have rocks and roots, or you're not jumping big, but we have a ton of rocks in Utah, and we like to jump a little bit too. So the rocks alone demand a suspension upgrade. This suspension is pretty terrible. It's really harsh, and no adjusting it has made it any better. So definitely plan on an upgrade. But my point is, steer tube length. I actually, let's say I buy a brand new Fox 40, which is probably what's going to happen, because I don't think I'm going to find a used one with a steer tube this long. That is going to be incredibly difficult. Most of the used ones I find are cut between 6 and 7 inches, which is no way that that's going to work. I did find one that was cut at 8 1/8, which is not enough, because then that clamp issue that I just showed you, in my opinion, 8 1/2 is bare minimum, and a 9-inch would be ideal. So very important if you're looking for a replacement fork for the Surron. These are just standard mountain bike forks, but this length of the steer tube is your determining factor. This is going to be pretty much impossible to find a used one with a tube that long. I'm probably going to spend the winter looking, but I imagine I'm not going to be successful finding one, and probably end up having to buy new, which sucks because these forks are so dang expensive, but who knows, maybe I'll get lucky.